Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Tuesday morning, talking 8 games around the association. Before we dive in, your quick reminder, please make sure you're hitting that like and subscribe button down below. And if you're not already signed up to my daily content and projections, you can fix that problem by heading over to my Patreon page, patreon.com/Brent Hyden. You can sign up for my monthly packages available there, or you can send me a direct message on Twitter. My Twitter handle, @BrentHyden1, is in the description down below. You can get access for a one-time price that is now 50% off of what it was at the start of the season, now that we are over 50% through the year. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and hop into the games. Let's knock this one out pretty quick. We have the Clippers at Charlotte. First game of the night, Charlotte 3.5-point favorites, 226 over under. Danilo Gallinari remains out. Tobias Harris is questionable but expected to play. Tony Parker and Cody Zeller both probable for this game. Lots to like here. Lou Williams has been playing really well, 25.5 points per game over his last 4 games. Malik Monk has also been playing pretty well, 4 straight games scoring in double figures, and Nick Batum shooting 14 of 25 from the floor over the last 3 games. Looking at the Clippers side of things first, obviously it starts with Tobias Harris battling a little bit of a shoulder injury, should be good to go here tonight. While he doesn't actually see a usage increase with Danilo Gallinari out the floor, he does see a fantasy boost. He gets plus 3.66 fantasy points per 36 minutes with Danilo Gallinari off the floor. Hornets giving up 45.5 rebounds per game, 22nd in defensive efficiency to power forwards. I love Tobias Harris, coming in at 7,900 on DraftKings, 7,800 over on FanDuel. Really strong spot for Harris is coming off 2 down games, again battling a little bit of a shoulder injury, bad matchup against Toronto, but this is a pretty good bounce back spot for him, and we know he has the upside. He has struggled a little bit with consistency, getting you some of those low 30s since Danilo Gallinari went down, but he also has those 50 plus fantasy point games, which is really appealing here. Pretty strong tournament option here tonight. I like Patrick Beverley, someone else that draws a really strong matchup here. Minutes have been really solid for him. The Toronto game was down to 31 against Detroit, but most nights now that everybody is out, gonna get you mid 30s in minutes. Really solid 20 plus fantasy point floor. Rebounding upside has been nice to see. He does have at least 6 rebounds in all but 2 of his last 10 games. That's really appealing, and in a matchup against a Charlotte team that really struggles against opposing backcourts, I really like him. Absolutely love Lou Williams here, coming in at 7,300 on DraftKings, 7,700 on FanDuel. Over 40 fantasy points in 3 straight games prior to the Raptors game, 34.6% usage rate, 1.34 fantasy points per minute whenever you take Gallinari off the floor. Primary ball handler when he is on the floor. Really strong spot for him as well. Absolutely love Lou Williams. Would definitely recommend getting some exposure to him here tonight. Avery Bradley, strong cash value option in this spot. It's 3,700 on DraftKings, 3,800 on FanDuel. Outside of that, I don't have a ton of interest in Montrezl Harrell, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It is worth noting Alexander, 4,400 on DraftKings, but 6,400 on FanDuel. I like him on DraftKings as a tournament option. I like him maybe even as a cash value. Minutes are creeping up there a little bit. Production has been really solid recently, over 20 fantasy points and 5 straight games, over 30 in 3 of those games. I'm not touching him on FanDuel, but over on DraftKings makes for a decent option here. Boban Marjanovic got some run last game. He's played 17 minutes in back-to-back games. Really tough to trust the rotation with Doc Rivers and what he's doing as center, but worth keeping an eye on if you're building some tournament lineups here tonight. On the Charlotte side of things, Cody Zeller expected to return, which is a boost to Kemba Walker. It's going to help stabilize some of his performances because he has this pick-and-roll partner back. Clippers have ranked 21st in defensive efficiency to opposing point guards on the season, giving up 26 points, 8.7 assists, 6.1 rebounds, 44% field goal percentage, and 36% shooting from 3. Absolutely love Kemba Walker in this spot, one of my top options on the slate. I expect him to bounce back in a big way against the Clippers tonight. 8,700 on DraftKings, 9,300 on FanDuel. Going to be someone that I have a lot of exposure to. I like Cody Zeller as a value option. I would like to hear that he's not going to be too terribly limited, But he's only 4K on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel, mostly going to be passing there. But we know the Clippers really bad against opposing centers, giving up a ton of rebounds, a ton of points in the paint. It's a really good spot here for Cody Zeller. I like him in cash. I like him in tournaments. I could see him definitely getting 25, 26, 27 fantasy points, which is perfectly fine in cash, and getting close to where you're wanting him to be for tournaments. I do like Jeremy Lamb as well. Has been over 25 fantasy points in 6 of his last 10 games. He comes in at 5,800 on DraftKings, 5,500 over on FanDuel. Just a really strong cash game option here tonight. Outside of that, you can look at Marvin Williams, really strong option as well. Has some rebounding upside in the spots. Clippers 24th in defensive efficiency to opposing power forwards. He's really cheap, 4,900 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. I don't hate Malik Monk or Tony Parker as tournament values. Parker would be a pretty solid point guard option over on FanDuel where you can drop his score. And the aforementioned Malik Monk, better play over on DraftKings than he is over on FanDuel. But again, at just 4,600, a little bit pricey for a drop score candidate, but has been playing really well, scoring in double figures in 4 straight games, over 20 fantasy points in each. I don't hate taking a shot on him tonight. Moving on, Boston, Cleveland. This game, yeah, Boston 12-point favorites in this one, 214.5 over under, and Kyrie Irving is out. Rob Williams is questionable. Aaron Baines is out. Tristan Thompson out. Chetty Osman out. And Kevin Love obviously out as well. We don't know yet the status of Wade Baldwin. Nick Stauskas to new Cleveland Cavaliers came over in the Rodney Hood trade. That being said, looking at the Boston side of things first, obviously Terry Rozier, top option here, coming in at 6,700 on DraftKings, 7K over on FanDuel. Both DraftKings and FanDuel did make the adjustment to raise his price, and well, that really sucks. Other than that, though, like 36.3 fantasy points per game without Irving on the floor this season. Current price, still a solid cash option, still has some tournament upside. We know he's going to put up a really solid game, is averaging 32 fantasy points in 25 minutes against the Cavaliers in 2 games this season. I really like Marcus Smart. Starting at that 2-guard position, comes in really, really affordable at 5,300 across the industry. Averages just shy of a fantasy point per minute, 0.92 fantasy points per minute. Cavaliers 23rd in defensive efficiency to opposing shooting guards. Smart, a strong cash option. Generally speaking, these 2 games were really bad, but most nights going to get you in the 20-plus fantasy point range, especially with Kyrie Irving being out. I love Jaylen Brown coming off the bench, 4,900 on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. If I'm fading Terry Rozier, I'm probably going to be locking in some Jaylen Brown. He does own a 25% usage rate, averages 0.99 fantasy points per minute with Kyrie Irving off the floor, averaging 32 fantasy points per game with him out this season. This is a pretty good spot. Cleveland really struggling to defend the rim, where Brown takes 62% of his shots. Al Horford, 1.20 fantasy points per minute, 20.4% usage rate without Kyrie Irving. Really tough to overlook him. I know there is some blowout risk here, so there is a chance he plays limited minutes, but at 6,600 on DraftKings, really, really appealing. 8K on FanDuel, not as appealing, but FanDuel always overprices centers. Al Horford has just been so good recently. Did struggle a little bit against New York. Played limited minutes again. Fell short, just short of a double-double. Fell just short of a double-double against OKC. Still only played 31 minutes, but even in some of these games where he's getting 28, 29 minutes, he's still putting up 40+, and he's just been playing so well. I have a lot of interest in Al Horford. Jason Tatum, Marcus Morris, 2 guys you can look at as well. I would lean towards Marcus Morris or even Gordon Hayward off the bench as strong options here. You can even consider Daniel Tice. Could see a decent amount of run if Rob Williams is also ruled out, with Aaron Baines already being out. Would be a decent value tournament option if you expect this game to blow out. As I mentioned, Tatum and Horford, 2 guys, or Tatum and Hayward, 2 guys you can look at, as well as Marcus Morris. Morris, 26.2% usage rate, 1.06 fantasy points per minute with Irving off the floor. Draws a really, really solid matchup. Gordon Hayward, 3.1% increase in usage, 3.4 fantasy points per 36 minutes without Irving on the floor. 5K on DraftKings, 5K over on FanDuel. He is a little bit of an interesting option here tonight. Cleveland side of this game, no, I don't really want to look at too much here. It is worth noting with Cedi Osman out, there's going to be a little bit of a shortened rotation. Again, we don't really know the status of Nick Stauskas, Wade Baldwin, if they're going to be able to suit up here. Alec Burks is a little bit interesting here. Comes in at 5,100 on DraftKings, 5,600 over on FanDuel. 1.13 fantasy points per minute, 26.6% usage rate whenever you take Osman off the floor. His ability to attack the paint really helps him in this matchup, as we have been able to target Boston with some of these guards that attack the paint this season. He's had some success against them in the previous matchups. Not a terrible tournament option here tonight. Same with Jordan Clarkson, 1.09 fantasy points per minute, 31% usage rate off the bench. Larry Nance is the guy that I want to talk about. Now that we have Aaron Baines once again being out, we're going to be able to go back to the trend of picking on Boston with big men, and Larry Nance should get over 30 minutes tonight, coming off back-to-back games with double-digit rebounds and points. Not a terrible option here. More of a tournament option at 5,800 on DraftKings, 6,300 on FanDuel, but someone that we can definitely look at. Outside of that, I'm just not going with Cleveland. There's other games to target here tonight. Lakers at Indiana. Lakers 3-point favorites in this one, 217 over under. Victor Oladipo is out. Lonzo Ball is out. Josh Hart questionable. Bunch of other players listed as probable but expected to play. Darren Collison coming off his second straight 20-point effort, and Brandon Ingram has scored 20 or more points in 5 of the past 7 games. LeBron James, 10-7 on DraftKings, 10-8 over on FanDuel. People probably going to feel a little bit spurned after he had a DNP rest the other nights. Post-lock, no one could get him out of their lineups, but it is a pretty good spot for him tonight. LeBron James, 37% usage rate, 1.54 fantasy points per minute whenever you take Lonzo Ball off the floor. He is absolutely matchup proof. I know the matchup against Indiana sucks, but it's LeBron James. And, well, he can feast in just about every matchup. He did play like 40 minutes the first game back from against the Clippers. That's why he needed a day off to get, or a night off 2 days after that game. But I feel pretty confident in his minutes here tonight. Really strong option if you're going to be paying up somewhere. Kyle Kuzma, Rajon Rondo, decent option here. Kuzma, 1.04 fantasy points per minute, 22.6% usage rate when sharing the floor with LeBron. Takes 37% of his shots from 3. Pacers have allowed opponents to shoot over 36% from 3 this season. Rajon Rondo, 40-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. Will continue to flirt with triple-doubles as long as he's getting the run. He's still playing a bunch of minutes. 33 minutes is what I have him projected for. I do expect him to play maybe even 34, 35. But again, going to be flirting with those triple-doubles night in and night out. Not a great matchup here, but really tough to overlook the minutes and the ability he has to put up a solid game. Brandon Ingram, as I mentioned, has scored 20 or more points in 5 of the last 7 games. Ingram, 41% of his shots come at the rim. The Pacers allowing opponents to shoot 64.7% at the rim over the last 10 games. I don't hate taking a shot on Brandon Ingram at 5,900 over on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel. Could actually have a pretty solid game here. Didn't have a terrible outing against the Pacers last time these teams faced off. 27 points at his current price tag of 5,900 is not the worst thing in the world. I don't have a lot of interest in anyone else. KCP, Hart, Zubac. They're guys you can sprinkle into 150 lineups, but I'd rather look elsewhere. On the Pacers side of things, Bojan Bogdanovic let me down last night. He comes in at 6K over on DraftKings, 5,800 over on FanDuel. Still had a cash-worthy game. Went 4-12 from the floor, a couple more of those shots, and he has a really solid night. He still leads the team in usage whenever you take everybody, Victor Oladipo off the floor, 25.7%, 0.94 fantasy points per minute. It's a 4.7% usage increase and a 4.01 fantasy point per 36-minute increase. Lakers 26th in defensive efficiency, 2 small forwards, 20.6 points allowed, 7.8 rebounds, 3.8 assists allowed, 45% shooting. I really like Bojan Bogdanovic as my favorite option in this spot tonight. Darren Collison, as I noted yesterday, assist percentage goes from 28% to 35.8% without Victor Oladipo. He comes in at a solid 6,400 across the industry. And pretty good spot here from tonight. Again, 20 plus fantasy or 20 plus real points in back-to-back games. The assist numbers are really strong for him. Lakers really, really good against opposing point guards, but I still like the spot for him. He has over 30 fantasy points in 3 straight. Had a good outing against the Lakers last time out. Aaron Holiday, Edmund Sumner, not on my radar. Miles Turner, definitely the guy that I'm looking at here once again tonight. He's 6,500 over on DraftKings and 7,300 over on FanDuel. 3 straight games with at least 30 fantasy points. Rebounding should be there for him tonight. We know the Lakers really, really bad against opposing big men. 47.1 rebounds per game allowed. 23rd in defensive efficiency to opposing centers. We did see DOMANTAS SABONIS have a good game last night as well. 5,600. I like him in tournaments, but again, having Tyreke Evans on that second unit does actually hurt Sabonis a significant amount, but if he's snapped out of that poor shooting slump, I don't hate taking a shot on him in tournaments. You can roll Thaddeus Young in cash games. Matchup not the greatest. You can roll him in tournaments as well. Just not someone that's really, really high up on my radar, but still playing really, really well, so I don't hate taking a shot on Thaddeus Young as well. Moving on to Detroit at New York. Plugging right along. Just a couple more games left after this one. Detroit 2.5 point favorites in this one. 205 over under. Ntilikina and Mudiay out for this game. Looking at the Detroit side of things, fantastic matchup against the Knicks. Gonna start with Blake Griffin, who is my favorite option in this spot. He comes in at 8,800 on DraftKings, 9,200 over on FanDuel. Really, really, really good spot here. Obviously, Knicks gonna get better interior as far as their interior defense goes with DeAndre Jordan back there, but they've given up 52.6 points in the paint per game, along with 48.2 rebounds to opponents, 30th in defensive efficiency to opposing power forwards on the season. Blake Griffin, who leads the team in usage just shy of 30%, should absolutely feast here tonight. Again, coming in at 8,800, coming off that down game against Denver, had a solid outing, just played limited minutes. This is a pretty good spot for him tonight. Shot pretty poorly against the Knicks last time these teams played, still put up 40 plus fantasy points. I like Blake Griffin here. I like Andre Drummond in tournaments. Hasn't joined and has not had a bunch of success against DeAndre Jordan, but he's been over 40 fantasy points in 7 of the last 10 games against him. That's somewhat attractive at 8,300 over on DraftKings, 9,300 over on FanDuel. Reggie Jackson, one of my favorite options here, coming in at 5,500 on DraftKings, 7K over on FanDuel. No thanks on FanDuel. DraftKings, yes please. Really, really good spot for him. Even after this game, 21.5 or 21.7 fantasy points, only played 22 minutes because of the blowout. Knicks 23rd in defensive efficiency to opposing point guards. Numbers not going to improve with Dennis Smith Jr. being there, so Reggie Jackson, really, really strong option. I like getting some exposure to him. There's a lot of guards in that price range. The aforementioned Dennis Smith Jr., who I'll get to in just a moment, is in there as well. I think Reggie Jackson probably goes overlooked. Reggie Bullock. I highlighted him yesterday against Denver. I'm going back to the well here. Pretty strong spot for him as well. Minutes should be there for him. Should be able to lock in a 20-plus fantasy points out of him tonight. It is a pretty good option here. 65% of his shots come from 3. Knicks have allowed opposing small forwards to shoot 40% from 3 this season. I have some interest in Reggie Bullock here tonight as well. I don't think I'm going to be chasing the Stanley Johnsons and the Luke Kennards and all those guys. If you want to sprinkle them in to tournaments, feel free. Just not really where I want to go. The New York side of things, I'm mostly just looking at Dennis Smith, Kevin Knox, and DeAndre Jordan here. The rest of these guys, there's just no telling. Maybe even Noah Vonleh, but there's just no telling how many minutes the rest of these guys are going to get. We did see Dennis Smith Jr. Get 26 minutes against Memphis in his first game in a Knicks uniform. I would expect him to get well over 30 tonight. I'm looking at about 32. Pistons, 22nd in defensive efficiency to opposing. Point guards allowing them they're allowing opponents to shoot 68.1% at the rim. Smith takes 42% of his shots at the rim. I love Dennis Smith Jr. here tonight. Again, 5,700 over on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. A better DraftKings play than a FanDuel play. Had a pretty good game against the Pistons last time these teams faced off. 19 points, 5 assists, 2 rebounds. Really, really good option here tonight. I mentioned DeAndre Jordan, just too cheap, I think, at 6,200 over on DraftKings. 7,700 on FanDuel, not really the story. But, you know, I do expect him to get over 30 minutes here tonight against a Pistons team that has really struggled to keep opponents out of the paint from scoring in the paint. 51.3 points in the paint allowed. DeAndre Jordan could actually have a really solid game here, and I like the spot for him. Damian Dotson, Wesley Matthews, you can sprinkle into tournaments, 150 lineups, FanDuel, whatever you want to do. I would lean towards Matthews being the guy. I would expect him to start to see more minutes. He played about 28 last game. Damian Dotson started, but actually played less minutes. It's just really tough. I don't know what Fizdale's going to do with Matthews, Dotson, Hazonia, a guy that's been playing really well recently, but not someone that I have a lot of interest in. You're really needing him to put up his big games and limited minutes, and it's just not an attractive spot for him. Not an attractive spot for Noah Vonleh, who moved back to the 4, which saw him play less minutes against Memphis. It's really, really tough to really get excited about that as well. And Kevin Knox, the only other guy that really has a lot of interest, 5,300 over on DraftKings, 5,100 on FanDuel. His minutes are going to be there no matter what. He's going to play a ton of minutes, take a decent amount of shots. Matchup really sucks. He's really struggled with consistency recently, but again, you're locking in a decent amount of minutes, and that's somewhat appealing. Let's move on, because, well, I don't want to play a lot of Knicks. Toronto at Philly. Philly 4.5-point favorites in this one. 229 over under. Kyle Lowry doubtful. Jonas Valanciunas doubtful. JJ Redick should be able to go after resting last game against the Kings. Looking at a couple of hot streaks. Joel Embiid, 5th straight double-double, averaging 9.6 points, 16.2 rebounds over that stretch. He's averaging 22.7 points and 11.3 rebounds against the Raptors this season. Serge Ibaka has recorded a career best 6 straight double-doubles. Looking at the Raptors side of things first, Fred VanVleet, Kawhi Leonard, core options for me here tonight. With Lowry off the floor, Kawhi Leonard, 35.1% usage rate, 1.37 fantasy points per minute. Did let us down against the Clippers. That game, a little bit of a blowout. Definitely going back to the well here with Kawhi Leonard at 9,300 on DraftKings, 9,800 over on FanDuel. Matchup not really terribly great, but Kawhi Leonard going to have his hands in a lot of what Toronto is doing tonight, so I absolutely love him. Fred VanVleet averages 28.5 fantasy points this season with Kyle Lowry out. Draws a decent matchup. As the Sixers have been below league average against opposing point guards all season. So Fred VanVleet, someone that's really, really tough to overlook. 4,600 on DraftKings, 5,900 on FanDuel. Again, another core option for me tonight. I really love Pascal Siakam as well. I've been attacking Philly with power forwards this season. They ranked 21st in defensive efficiency against the position. Siakam, 24.5% usage rate, 1.07 fantasy points per minute whenever you take Kyle Lowry, Jonas Valanciunas off the floor. He comes in at 6,300 on DraftKings, 6,800 over on FanDuel. I have a lot of interest in him. Serge Ibaka is interesting in GPPs. He's been able to have success against the Sixers this season. Somewhat shockingly, actually having some success against Joel Embiid. Not a ton of success. I'll reiterate, just some, averaging 33.5 fantasy points in 27 minutes. That's still not terribly bad. Over on DraftKings at 6,200, over on FanDuel at 7,200. I would rather go Pascal Siakam. You can look at Danny Green, 4,100 over on DraftKings, 4,300 on FanDuel. Has not been great in this matchup. Has taken 30 shots across 2 games. Or 3 games, sorry, so about 10 per game. That's somewhat appealing, and the Sixers allowing opponents to shoot 36% from 3 over the last 10 games. There's just not a lot to talk about in this game. You know where you're going. There's only really 3 or 4 guys you're looking at from the Toronto side on a nightly basis. On the Philly side, kind of the same story. You're looking at Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler the most. It's rare that I actually like Jimmy Butler, but at his price tag, 7,500 on DraftKings, 8,600 on FanDuel, he is pretty appealing here, and I'll tell you why. Toronto, 21st in defensive efficiency to opposing small forwards. He's averaging 48.4 fantasy points in the team's 2 previous meetings, and the Toronto has allowed opponents to shoot 48.7% in the paint over the last 10 games, 41.9% in the mid-range on the season. And if you look at Jimmy Butler's shot profile, 41% of his shots come in those 2 areas. I do like me some Jimmy Butler in tournaments here tonight, especially on DraftKings at that $7,500 price tag. Toronto 17th in defensive efficiency to centers over the last 10 games, giving up 25.3 points, 14.4 rebounds. Joel Embiid, obviously matchup proof, should absolutely feast. He's been over 60 fantasy points in, 3 of the last 4 games? Yeah. 4 of the last 5 games, he's been feasting, as I mentioned. Really good spot here for him. I don't hate taking a shot on Ben Simmons, GPPs, JJ Redick in cash. With Corey Brewer being out tonight because he's not able to sign a new contract, you could get a couple extra minutes for TJ McConnell, maybe a couple extra minutes for a few of these other guys. No one really jumps off the page. Mike Muscala going to get some extra minutes because Wilson Chandler's out. Jonah Bolden might get a couple extra minutes, but I'm just not really excited about a whole heck of a lot from anyone there. It's just not a spot where I really want to attack tonight. There's, again, other games that I think are a little bit better outside of those core options that I already mentioned. Looking at Minnesota at Memphis. Memphis 1-point favorites in this one. 203.5 over under. We just saw this game a couple of nights ago, and it went into overtime. Robert Covington, Tyus Jones, Robert Covington, Tyus Jones, Derrick Rose out, and Jeff Teague is doubtful for this game. Kyle Anderson is out. Garrett Temple is out. Joakim Noah questionable. JaMychal Green questionable. Whew, that was a lot of injuries. Man, that's a ton. Jared Bayless has back-to-back double-doubles, 15 points, 10 assists against the Nuggets. Wiggins, 8 of 29 from the floor over his last 2 games, including 1 of 8 from beyond the arc. Looking at the Memphis side of things, Mike Conley, at least 40 fantasy points in 5 straight games, coming off a 54 burger against the Knicks. This is a pretty good spot for him tonight. He's 8,200 on DraftKings, 9K over on FanDuel. The Wolves have really struggled to defend the rim recently, allowing opponents to shoot 67% at the rim over the last 10 games. Pretty big boost for Michael Conley here because he takes 25% of his shots at the rim. Had a really good game against this team last time out. As I mentioned, over 40 fantasy points in 4 straight games. Pretty good spot here for him. You know the minutes are going to be there for him. He's playing out of his mind recently. 5 straight games actually with 40+ fantasy points. Playing out of his mind on the trading block. Who knows what's going to happen with him, but definitely interested in him here tonight. Bruno Caboclo really let us down. Last game has not really been that good since he had the stretch of 2 games earlier, but someone that I do expect to get a decent amount of minutes if JaMychal Green is out, because he is JaMychal Green is just not healthy. He can't play a lot of minutes. He's been hampered by that injury. If you just look at his game log, 20 minutes against Charlotte, but 9, 5, 7. There he is. This stretch where he's 30, 27. That's whenever he was back being healthy, but he's not healthy. He might not even play here, which would open up more minutes for Bruno Caboclo. I like him in tournaments as a value. Excellent matchup here as Minnesota really, really, really struggling against opposing small forwards. I like Marc Gasol. Wolves giving up 46 rebounds, 14.4 second chance points. Marc Gasol, again, someone else on the trading block, has looked a little bit unmotivated recently, but he's still a really solid cash game option. Justin Holiday, playing a ton of minutes. He comes in at, that's Robert Covington. He comes in at 4,700 on DraftKings. 4,500 on FanDuel, 35, 36, 37 minutes most nights. Not a ton of upside. Really, really scoring reliant recently, but again, matchup pretty solid here tonight against Minnesota. Jaren Jackson, always a strong tournament option. If JaMychal Green misses, probably see guys like Julian Washburn get a few extra minutes. Well, like I said, we'll see Bruno Caboclo get some extra minutes. Yvonne Robb, Joakim Noah actually will get a couple extra minutes as well. They've played some minutes with Noah alongside Gasol, and that just looks really weird. But it has happened, so it's something to keep an eye on here, and I'll update in Discord should news come out. Minnesota side of this game, not nearly as attractive. I mentioned Jared Bayless, back-to-back double-doubles. He's pretty appealing still at 5,400 on DraftKings, 5,900 over on FanDuel. I know I'm late to the party with Jared Bayless, but He's averaging almost a fantasy point per minute whenever you take all these injured Wolves off the floor. Gonna play about boatload of minutes. I mean, if you just look at his minutes, and I mean, it's disgusting. 35, 43, 37, 40, 30. Yeah, it's disgusting. But he's been over 30 fantasy points in those 4 straight games, 5 straight games, 6 straight games. So no reason you can't go back to him, even though the matchup is absolutely terrible. Andrew Wiggins does draw a pretty favorable matchup here. Averages about a fantasy point per minute with all these guys off the floor. 30.9% usage rate, 6K for Andrew Wiggins on DraftKings, 61 on FanDuel. Pretty attractive price tag. Has been playing really poorly recently, shooting the ball like absolute garbage, but it's not a terrible GPP play here. Karl Anthony Towns, 32.3% usage rate, 1.67 fantasy points per minute. Again, absolutely atrocious matchup. 9,700 on DraftKings, 10.7 on FanDuel. Still not a spot where I would be completely afraid to use him. Did get in foul trouble against Marc Gasol last time out. Still put up 16 points with 10 rebounds in 26 minutes. It's not a terrible spot here for Karl Anthony Towns. I would definitely consider some tournament exposure here. Moving on, last 2 games of the night. Orlando, OKC. OKC 10-point favorites in this one, 224.5 over under. Jonathan Simmons questionable. Mohamed Bamba is out for this game. Looking at the Orlando side, Oklahoma City's defense, 113.8 defensive rating over the last 10 games. They've struggled to defend wings. They rank 24th in defensive efficiency to small forwards. They've allowed opponents to connect on 40% of their 3-point attempts over the last 10 games. That's going to make Terrence Ross, Evan Fournier, and Jonathan Isaac the guys that I want to look at here tonight the most. Terrence Ross, 5K on DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel. Evan Fournier, 5,200 on DraftKings, 5,600 on FanDuel. Jonathan Isaac, 5,300 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. Those are my 3 primary options here, and I love Isaac Ross as cash game options, Evan Fournier as a tournament option. Had a decent game against OKC last time out, 7 of 14 from the floor. Does have upside. Has not really shown it recently, but that price tag for Evan Fournier, who is second on the team in usage, is really appealing in tournaments. But the Terrence Ross and Jonathan Isaac plays, those guys have just been a little bit more consistent. Terrence Ross, birthday game, coming off a dud against Brooklyn, but really strong outing against the Pacers, strong outing against OKC, Houston. He's been really good in this stretch of games. Most nights going to get you in the mid-20s with 30-plus fantasy point upside. He's the guy I'm going to be building around if I'm getting exposure to Orlando, which I kind of want to do. Jonathan Isaac, as I mentioned, has been playing out of his mind recently. Double-digit rebounds in back-to-back games. Definitely seeing a little bit of a boost with Mohamed Bamba being out. But he's been consistent recently, 20-plus in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of his last 10 games. It's not a terrible spot for him against OKC. 27 minutes, 11 points, 8 rebounds, a couple steals. I would definitely be okay with some Jonathan Isaac here in this spot tonight. You can look at DJ Augustin as a cash game play, 4,700 on DraftKings, 4,600 on FanDuel. Again, most nights going to get you right around 22 to 25 fantasy points with some upside. You can also look at Vucevic, 9,600 on DraftKings, 10K on FanDuel. Had a good game against OKC. OKC has actually struggled against opposing big men recently. 27th in defensive efficiency to the position over the last 10 games. They've struggled on the boards. Again, their interior defense has also really struggled over the last 10 games. So really strong tournament play here tonight. On the Oklahoma City side of things, Russell Westbrook, 19 triple-doubles on the season, 6 straight triple-doubles for Russell Westbrook. Absolutely awesome spot here for him tonight. He triple-doubled against this team when they faced off a couple of nights ago. Orlando, just a league average defense against opposing point guards. Russell Westbrook, really, really strong option here. Still affordable, 11.4 on DraftKings, 12K over on FanDuel. Been playing really, really well recently. So has Paul George. Paul George scored 37 points last time out, has topped 30 points in 7 of the past 8 games, averaging 34.3 points over that span. He comes in at a significant discount over Russell Westbrook over on DraftKings, 10-2, 11.5 over on FanDuel. He's reaching he's reaching a little bit of an absurd price over on FanDuel, but looking at these performances, 50 plus, 60 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus, 50 plus in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of his last 10 games. If the pattern holds, he's coming 60 plus here after this one. He's alternated 60-point games over the last few. So yeah, if you believe in that kind of pattern, there you go. Magic struggling to keep opponents off the glass, which is a boost to Jerami Grant, Steven Adams. Adams missed this game the last time these teams played, but Jerami Grant at 5,300, really strong cash and tournament option here, 5,700 on FanDuel. Or yeah, on FanDuel, just a guy most nights going to get you in the mid to upper 20s, or mid to upper 20s with 30 plus fantasy point upside, as we saw against Orlando last time out. I like him here. Dennis Schroeder, a solid value. OKC's the same thing every single night. Like, I don't have to go over this. Y'all know the drill with OKC. Moving on, last game of the night, Miami at Portland. Portland 7.5-point favorites in this one, 2-13 over under. Derrick Jones Jr. and Goran Dragic out for this game. Portland has scored at least 120 points in each of the last 3 games and 5 of the last 7. Dion Waiters, the human trash can, has been really, really bad recently, going 7 of 32 from the floor over the last 4 games. It's not a very attractive game. I know Portland has scored at least 120 points in each of the last 3, 5 of the last 7, but it's still not terribly attractive. I will say Josh Richardson, Kelly Olynyk, really, really interesting options in this spot. Portland ranks 22nd in defensive efficiency to small forwards, allowing 20.8 points, 7.6 rebounds, 3.7 assists, and a 44.5% field goal percentage, 38.7% from 3. 42% of Josh Richardson's shots come from 3. He's been really, really bad recently. Did have a good game against OKC in a somewhat similar matchup. Again, has been bad. I do like him, though. Minutes are going to be there for him. I expect the field goal attempts to go up. Pretty good matchup for him tonight. Kelly Olynyk, the guy that I really want to talk about, he's been the beneficiary with Derrick Jones Jr. going down since that game. That was against the Knicks. We saw Kelly Olynyk play 17 minutes in that game, but 23 against Chicago, 31 against OKC, 34 against Indiana. Has been over 30 fantasy points in 2 straight games. The Trailblazers really, really struggle against power forwards, opposing power forwards, averaging 21.8 points and 11.1 rebounds against them. And Portland really struggling against 3-point shots, 37.2% allowed on above the break threes. 49% of Olynyk shots are above the break threes. I really like Kelly Olynyk here. It's really tough to trust these fringe guys for the Heat, but at 3,900 on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel, really, really strong option here tonight. You can look at HASSAN, WHITESIDE, Dion Waiters in tournaments. Both of these guys going to be suffering from the fact that Eric Spoelstra just wants to toy with their minutes. But we've seen HASSAN WHITESIDE a couple of games recently get over 30 fantasy points. 30 minutes. Matchup is terrible. Could definitely get some extended run here to battle down low with Jusuf Nurkic. Had a good game against Portland last time these teams faced off. I don't hate taking a shot on him in tournaments. As I mentioned, Dion Waiters just shooting like absolute garbage recently. Not really a spot where I want to use him, but in 150 lineups, feel free. Same with Tyler Johnson. Just not very appealing here. Dwayne Wade, always a good cash game play. Always a good tournament option at his current price tag. Has 30-plus fantasy point upside. Solid game against Portland last time these teams faced off. If you're trying to get a little bit of late night exposure, feel free to get some Dwayne Wade, Josh Richardson, Kelly Olynyk, even Justice Winslow, even though the matchup is terrible, has the ability to fill up the stat sheet. Not a terrible spot here for him tonight. Portland side, Damian Lillard has been outstanding recently. I'll get to him in just a minute, but Al-Farouq Aminu draws probably the best matchup from anyone on this side of the game, and he's just really, really cheap still. He comes in at 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel. My favorite cash game play of this entire game outside of like Dwayne Wade, just because of his consistency and what he provides for this team. Miami 24th in defensive efficiency to power forwards. They've allowed him to shoot 38% from 3 this season. Aminu Couple of down games recently, but has top 25 fantasy points in 6 of his last 10 games. Really, really strong option here. I mentioned Damian Lillard, solid option. Miami allowing opponents to shoot over 36% on above the break threes. Plenty of upside for Damian Lillard, who's been on fire, averaging 53.9 fantasy points on 30 points, 7 assists, 5.5 rebounds, 40% from beyond the arc over the last 10 games. He's 8,900 on DraftKings, 9,900 on FanDuel. I like the price on DraftKings, don't really like the price on FanDuel. CJ McCollum obviously has been on fire recently, 40 plus fantasy points in 3 of the last 4. One of those games without Damian Lillard. Miami has been kind of bad against opposing shooting guards this season. I don't hate CJ McCollum in tournaments. Rodney Hood, name to keep an eye on if we get word that he's going to play a decent amount of minutes. Would not be a terrible tournament option at his price tag. And Jusuf Nurkic, someone that we can at least consider in GPPs, although the matchup not that great. That's going to do it. That's all 8 games for tonight. I will be back tomorrow. I think Thursday and Sunday are the 2 days, again, that I'm going to be taking off. But we'll be back tomorrow for another pretty sizable slate. So good luck in all your contests tonight.